What a fun orchestration, John. Yeah, you know, I mean, I got your, you had a few questions about entering, and then you said that you were, you know, in that case you were done, and you sent me your score, and yeah, just taking a look at it now, it just is, you know, just so fun. Now, you know, having said that, you know, and the fact that I really enjoyed this and everything, just please don't take anything that I'm about to say too personal, right? Because I'm going to give you some feedback and possibly some guidance and so on, and it is no way detracting from the fact that I had a wonderful experience, you know, absorbing your take on this, right? Just as a piece of music on its own, and an effort, you know, that shows your personality and interests as an orchestrator, and I get all that, all right? All right, so let the carnage begin. No, just kidding. I don't. I am not that tough on this. I'm more constructive. I like to build orchestrators rather than tear them down. So let's talk about the role of the harp first. Okay, so you probably noticed that, like, you can just barely hear it a lot of the time. Like right here at the beginning, you can hear it really easily because there's nothing in the way, right? Then here, when it's just, there's a lot going on, and these winds and so on, and a lot of the overtones of these winds are absorbing the space that the harp needs to live in order to be really audible. And then, sort of to make matters more confusing, you have English horn and first violin playing, the English horn playing slurs, and the first violin playing pizzicato in triplets, right? So, you know, that the pizzicato itself is enough to confuse the sound, you know, the clarity of the harp right in there. And this is really fun. This kind of, you know, is kind of Paris taxi, or Paris, Paris police car kind of sound, or ambulance, that kind of back and forth. That's really kind of cool. Now, notice that, like, it is very, very close to other things that are happening, right? Now, the fact that you have the flute here to guide the ear makes a big difference, right? But you know, it's just still in the range of the harp that will easily get absorbed by things around it, especially the staccato here and the violins. Now, going forward here, we've got, you know, you can add accents all you like, but if you have this much going on around the harp in a register where it doesn't really speak over, right? Like if the harp were an octave higher, you wouldn't have that problem. But here, you know, you're just so close to everything else that's going on that the harp is just getting almost completely swallowed up. You know, if you're happy just to get the slight sound of the attack of the pluck, then that's fine for you. But the thing is that you don't get the beautiful quality of sound of the harp. Now, we have another little minor thing. Okay, it's kind of an engraving thing. Like all of these tied eighths should be quarter notes. Okay? See, it's just so much easier to read, right? Okay. Then here, you know, you got your harp and spiccato, so, you know, like just sort of a bounce. And so on, and yeah, that won't necessarily blot out the harp too much, but it's still, you know, I mean, it's a percussive attack from your sort of a bouncy attack from your violin. So I guess, you know, using the harp to sort of help punctuate the strings and vice versa, I guess, but you know, you still don't get the quality of the harp. And then this is just completely swallowed up by everything. But I mean, is this sort of situation where I would just as soon have you leave it in, or maybe have the harp play an octave higher so that it is closer to the glockenspiel, right? So like instead of having the glockenspiel 2 octaves higher than the harp, it's only the harp being an octave higher will put it like only an octave lower than the glock, right? So yeah, you know, all right. So there's just some comments about the harp. sometimes it's nice to just throw a slur on it, just kind of just sort of help to kind of encapsulate it as a phrase and so on. Not that it makes an enormous amount of difference. Okay, all right. So those are just some thoughts about that. Now let's just talk about marcato here. Okay, like there already is a marcato accent in Sibelius, right? So I just say get rid of that, and then go right to this, right? Now you don't need mark at all. Mark can go take a break, right? And you just have this, right? So that's marcato or martellato, right? So you'll get that same kind of an effect. Alrighty. Okay, so now let's go back to the beginning of the piece and just talk about everybody working together now. I thought it was really imaginative. Intro, setting mood effectively is my first question, and I think that you really do. It's almost like the beginning of like a cue from like a weekly science fiction series or something like that. It just really had a lot of imagination, and it was just very fun. Like there are a few things that sort of cloud up the picture, like the triplets. I don't think that quite works with you're doing this yada da da dum. I think that needs to be really, really clear. Like it is like the apex. It's like all of this entire phrase. It is all leading to this one point. Da 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 dum. Right, that's the most important part of the entire thing. So why are triplets going on at the same time, confusing everything? You see what I mean? Okay. And then you are also making things difficult on yourself. Right? This is really important, isn't it? Yada da 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 da. That is incredibly important. So you're giving it to possibly the weakest instrument that it could be given to when it is surrounded by reed instruments, right? So you have a beautiful reedy ba ba da 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 and so on. You've got these tremolo violins up here, crescendo to mezzo forte. There's a little strange here. Hang on, see if I can get. Yeah, there we go. You have the crescendo to mezzo forte here. I might have resized your score. I don't remember. So some things might look a little strange. Okay, so that's all fine. And you get this beautiful sound, the English horn. Oh, just so gorgeous. And the clarinets, it's all working together. All right, and then you have just this cushion of glorious reedy tone. Now that cushion of tone has overtones that sit above it. An octave and a fifth and all that other stuff. What do you think they're going to do to this flute? They're going to kill it, and in fact, you can hear it in the mock-up. Right? That's one of the beauties of Note Performer is that a lot of times, like the way that the overtones work from instruments in Note Performer is really similar to how they work in real life in terms of like clouding up the picture. Right? And here, you just have a perfect example of that. Just go back and listen to it, and you can just see how the flute is barely there. Right? And you have this whole first oboe is doing nothing, right? Nothing, right? Why couldn't they be going da 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 and end on this E, right? And on this E. So like there is just a lot, Yeah, and since this is all in C, right? So here are those two notes being played by the flute there, right? So just like you got it covered. The flute doesn't need to do anything in this register where it is so invisible. And then when you go ba-da-da-da-dum, there's like kind of no need for the flute to be here at all. The oboe takes care of it perfectly, and you've got everything else happening too. So, right? Now, what does it really add? Now, if you had first oboe and first flute unison together on this part, going to the E and then the D, right? Da-da-da-da-da, E, da-da-da-da-dum. If you had a unison like that, then you have the flutes, you have first flute or whoever coloring the oboe part and giving it just a little bit more shine, which it kind of doesn't really need. But if you want it, then you could do it. That's an example of how you could use the flute there, or you could just completely leave the flute out and actually have a beautiful little oboe solo in there, right? which when you add all this icing on top of the harp, you know, that makes a perfect companion, right? So there's one other thing here that you didn't do. The conductor will be, you know, like it's like the first thing that if you send this to an orchestra, let's say you've got a buddy, your local community orchestra's like, hey man, I heard you orchestrated, you know, like I was watching the, I was it was so great to see your name come up, and I watched that and I was just really impressed. I really thought that your orchestration of it was the most imaginative, and that, you know, that I would like to, you know, I would like to program it for my orchestra. And it's like, okay, great. And then you go home and you score out the rest of the movement and you send them the score, and the first thing the orchestra librarian wants to know is just like, who's playing the entrance here, right? Who is that? Is that first bassoon? Is that second bassoon? It isn't taken for granted when you just see a single line of music that is the first player or any player, right? Who's playing the flute here and there? And who's playing this oboe? Is this first or second? Who is that, right? So it's something that you might want to, in future, like entering, you know, like just preparing a score for anything, whether it's an orchestration challenge or to, you know, for it to be performed. Always think about who is playing what. All right, so moving on to this next part. All right, so 2/4, some bars of 2/4, and then you're going to common time here. Yeah, so I mean, this is a place, if you're still in 2/4 time, then it's perfectly fine just to have bar rests here. Okay, and then that way you're kind of giving yourself an extra beat, right? Like almost like a pausa or a caesura, right? Before you start. Da 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 bum 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 bum. It's a really nice little bassoon solo, and I have to say this is the first time I've seen it, and I've processed about 30 scores by now, and I'm kind of going through my first day of evaluating about 3 weeks ahead of the 3 weeks ahead of the release time. I'm really enjoying myself, by the way, if I do say so myself. Yeah, so I mean, you can give the line a little bit of contour, even if it's not in the original piano score, right? Da 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 da, crescendo bum bum. Or you might want to hold off to here, da da ba 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 ba. You know, like you put it right in here. Huh? And this is really lovely, the way that the melody starts to change into other instruments and accompanying parts and everything else. It was really nicely done. And then here, you know, this is kind of driving me crazy. Sorry about this, John. Yeah, there we go. That's there. Oh, so much of a relief. And then, of course, go to treble clef in your bass clarinet. Oh, God. What a relief to my eyes. And this is really nice too. This boop 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 stuff happening here in your bass clarinet. Lovely. Just exactly the right thing to put in there. So I mean, it pretty much works. I think you keep it simple, and I think it's all incredibly charming. Right. And now going to, and I really like the fact that you are articulating on the downbeat, right? Ta 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 da ta 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 da. Right, and then you've got your da 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 da, and then it's kind of strange, like doo 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 doo. Yeah, I mean, it's all, you're just playing around with the part and adding some contrary motion and stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, it works. It's all good. It's very fun. You know, but you know, of course, you can't really hear the harp too well. One thing I'm not quite so sure about is the 2 against 3 thing happening here. Right? It just doesn't quite feel all that clear. You know, like, so it kind of brings me back to here, like this 3 against 4 here, and like here the 2 against 3. You know, I mean, I know, like, you know, getting a little bit of rhythmic counterpoint in there. I mean, what could it hurt? Well, I mean, what it could hurt is the fact that you are orchestrating music that has a very clear sense of purpose, right? And the more that you mess with that sense of purpose, just, you know, kind of in ways that like don't really have, you know, they don't have kind of a thematic purpose outside of just kind of adding a little variation, then it kind of just feels like you're interfering with yourself, right? You're interfering with the clarity of your vision. But yeah, I mean, but just fun, you know, kind of the way that this comes in here. Not too successful though, to kind of have this sort of voice crossing in here of the oboes above the flutes. It, you know, and then you have this C sharp third and so on. I mean, there are better ways of scoring this. All right, now here we're getting into this to this beautiful brass chorale. You know, I just thought that this was the best part right in here. You know, bum bum bum. But the only thing that I would sort of comment in here is like, you got 4 horns here, buddy. All right, like, where are horns 2 and 4? Right? What are they doing? Could they be doubling other pitches? Could these be, you know? Could there be more harmony happening in here, or could you be doubling up some of the horns and so on? Just to make certain lines thicker or stronger or whatever. Yeah. So I think that if you're going mezzo forte here with the brass and you have this big kind of brassy sound, this needs to be forte, right? So it just really stands out beautifully. And then just, you know, continuing on. Yeah, it has to be a clear forte and winds and so on. Yeah, and then you're just sort of bringing things to a close. Dun, 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 sort of almost as if this were the end of the thing. So look, just everybody, just once again, I'll repeat this. This might be something I say a lot. You don't have to bring things to a close. You don't have to make a little mini thing out of it, like, you know, here's the conclusion of this little sketch. You don't have to do that. You could just end, you know, you can end in a way that sort of feels arbitrary, right? It's just like, why did it stop? Well, that was all the bars that Thomas gave me. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to add extra stuff to it, right? Because you feel that it needs to end in a sort of in a cadence or you know, like, you know, in a way that like makes it self-contained. You do not have to do that. I'm not saying that it's bad to do it. I'm just saying you don't have to. All right. All right. So just, you know, kind of just for future reference, okay, John. The lower the flute goes on a unison line like this, with a stronger, you know, with a instrument that's stronger in its mid-range, like oboe, the more it sort of disappears and becomes not so useful. And then, of course, arco is not something possible for winds. I'm sure that's just a copy-paste error. But yeah, yeah, so just, you know, by the time the flute gets down to this D, it's starting to disappear. It gets down to this B, it's really contributing almost nothing, right? So, you know, it could have just played this A, and then you just leave the, you know, just leave the rest to the oboes, because they're doubled by both sets of violins, right? So it's just really thickening and strengthening the strings the way that it is. So the flutes kind of just don't really have much of a purpose past the G or F. But, you know, having said all that, I mean, I think it's really a fun arrangement. It just, you know, just really gave me a lot to talk about, and just so much enjoyment to, you know, to check out your mock-up and to look through the score and, you know, give you some feedback on it. One last little thing is that, like, this is completely unnecessary, okay? You do not need to mark a bowing on something like this. So, you know, like, if they were going to do a big row of like the same bow in the same direction, then the music would be like this, right? You'd have a slur over groups of notes. I mean, you could also be set up like this, right? So like if there isn't anything, if there are no slurs like that, then they are naturally going to be going up, down, or down, up, down, up, down, up, right? That'll just be the natural presumption. So, you do not need to put training wheels on a Maserati. These people know what they're doing. You don't need to tell them what to do. Almost the only time I ever mark bowings is when I want them to do the opposite of what they would normally do. Like there's very, very like the most notorious example of this in my memory is that I was doing an education concert, right? And there's part of the tradition of this education concert that you have these little 2 and 3 year olds watching the concert, and then you give them little drinking straws, and then you would have them practice bowing along with the orchestra, right? So I gave the players a piece where the up bow was on the down bow and the down bow was on the up bow for the purposes of demonstrating to the kids, because they would, like on the 1 they would feel the down bow and then on the 3 they would feel the up bow, right? But it was a piece where it was normally bowed the opposite way. So I put in the bowings, right? And I even put like on the first violin part where I knew the concertmaster would be looking, I put in a little comment on the staff saying, yes, it needs to be this way. He completely ignored me and he scribbled it all out and then had, and so on the dress rehearsal, he's doing it the entire orchestra is doing it the opposite way. So I had to talk to the conductor, talk to the concertmaster, say, could you please put the bowing back the way that it was? It's supposed to be that way because I'm demonstrating it to 3-year-olds, right? And then they said, oh, right. Other than situations like that, you will not need to mark up bows and down bows. So just don't worry about it. You don't need to mark it. All right. So anyways, other than all that, just really enjoyed looking at this score and starting this conversation with you, John. And and I really appreciate the effort you put into this and how you're supporting me on Patreon right now to get through what is probably going to be about 150, 180 scores this year. I kind of don't know what to expect. It could only be like 80, and that's fine because I am so busy right now. But if it were 180, it's all right. I can work through it. I think I can make it through to September, October, and get all your scores looked at. So thanks for that. Thank you all my other Patreon supporters and all my viewers out there. Please give John some feedback in the comments below. That's what this is all about. Want to make me a happy and healthy orchestration coach. The best compensation I can get for this is for you to help out John and to give them constructive feedback and maybe catch a few things that I didn't really have time to talk about or that I might have missed. Okay, that makes this a more complete experience for him and for you too when your evaluation comes around. All right. So with that, I will bid you adieu, and I think there might be one more release later today in this series of the Minim evaluations. So with the adorable painting, which might be Beethoven as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, or it might not. People are not really sure, but I really like that opening painting on this set of evaluations. So anyways, stay tuned for that. It'll come later today or tomorrow. See everybody really soon.